All right, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the final of 3 Renew TOT webinars for the year. We're glad you could join us. My name is Silke Caparelli. I'm broadcasting live from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and spring has arrived. It's rain today and rain tomorrow, but it is in the 50s, and I'm hoping it is as well where you are. You're all muted at the moment, but as we move along, and especially towards the end of our time together, we're going to have a reflection moment that includes a space for you to ask questions, make comments, and get some feedback given the work that we're going to do over the next hour. So today we are featuring Kathy Francois, Franker, I believe it is. Kathy, you're going to have to help me with your last name one more time.
And it's Kathy Francois.
Francois, I apologize.
That's okay.
I see a soft C when I look at that name. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about Kathy in a moment. To help guide your work and the referencing that you may want to do today, you can go to the tiny URL for Renew in PA, located at the bottom of your screen. And when you click on that drive, you're going to see this document that says New! Renew Integrity Tool 2016. And you might be saying, why 2016? That's not really new, but it is the most updated version that Pennsylvania is going to be transitioning towards over the next few months. Remember, the mission of PATEN is to support the efforts and initiatives of the Bureau of Special Education and to build the capacity of LEAs to serve students who receive special education services. Our goal for each child is to ensure IEP teams begin with a general education setting with the use of supplementary aids and services before considering a more restrictive environment. A note to everybody that's with us, we will be recording today's work and we'll be posting on the PATEN website. The slides for today are also available in your tiny URL. Hold your calendars. May 1 and 2 is the new RTOT training, which probably does not apply to anybody on this call. But if you encounter any behavior TAC or secondary transition TAC or anybody at all that's looking to learn more about what it means to be a trainer of trainings for Renew in Pennsylvania, it is May 1st and 2nd in Harrisburg. That training will be led by both Kristen Starosta and Karen Deary. Also, the second opportunity for a Renew Booster is May 16th. We captured some of our TOTs already. We had a blast. I'm going to show you a picture and tell you about a little bit about the feedback we got. That's May 16th. You can register for that on the PATEN calendar. And then finally, the PBIS forum is coming up, most of which all of you will be attending. That is May 14th and 15th. Note that there is a closed Renew TOT session on May 15th at 10 a.m. in which Kathy is going to work with us. We're all going to kind of team together and get some time to work through Renew. Also, you see on this slide are temporary dates for next year. Renew TOT webinars, the TOT booster for 2020, and the new TOT training. So just keep those on your calendar, keep them on your radar. Those are proposed dates for next year. They have not been approved, but just for your awareness. This is a picture of some of our Renew TOTs that went through the Renew Booster training and provided us with some awesome feedback. No, I did not ask their permission to put their faces up here. It's not in a permanent slide deck, but we just wanted to give a shout out to those Renew TOTs who attended and worked very hard. It was fun. It was a gaming format. We did get the feedback that the technology really exceeded what was necessary. So know that for the May 16th booster, I've scaled it back a little bit. We all appreciate the feedback you provided. We think it was successful, a great way to boost and remind ourselves of everything Renew. So thank you, a shout out to those who attended. All right, one more time before I turn it over to Kathy. For today's work, you want to make sure you download the new Renew Integrity tool if you have not done so already. It is in your tiny URL. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about Kathy. Kathy provides training, consultation, and technical assistance in the development and expansion of the implementation of school-wide PBIS. Kathy also provides training and technical assistance to schools in the development of Renew, an intensive support intervention to help at-risk youth engage in high school completion and post-secondary options. She has collaborated with several New Hampshire schools in training faculty to serve as Renew facilitators for youth, as well as build a sustainable system within the schools to support and monitor the Renew model. Kathy presents nationally, training schools and districts on the Renew model. She's also a part of Who Cares About Kelsey, a film project in which she and filmmaker Dan Habib share the benefits and process of Renew with audiences. So I'd like to welcome and really give a great tons of gratitude to Kathy for joining us for today. So Kathy, to you.
Thank you very much, Silky. And I just want to say I began my Renew journey back in 2002 when Renew was first introduced as a Tier 3 intervention for high school students at the school in which I worked. Since that time, Renew has not only expanded throughout our state to many other high schools, but also to other states nationally, which is very exciting. But we've also, within that growth, we keep expanding our tools based on feedbacks from facilitators, our coaches, our national partners, and youth and families themselves. And also important to us is keeping up with the latest research, particularly from PBIS and from implementation science, to really guide in shaping our instruments and our practices to make sure we can improve the implementation of Renew. Today, we're going to really try to dive into the fidelity instrument we use, the Renew Integrity tool, and look at some of the revisions that we've made and discuss how to use this tool to help facilitators reach good outcomes for students. And there we go. On this slide, I really want you to be thinking and reflecting on what does effective implementation mean. When we think about implementation, we know from research that training on an effective intervention is not enough. We may have a good practice in place, but we really need people skilled in coaching the intervention so people can implement practice as intended. What does Renew look like when it's being implemented well? Remember, students cannot benefit from an intervention they never received, or if it's not looking like the training model and practice that we are putting out there. So what is your coaching role? How do you communicate? Who do you communicate regularly with? How would you describe that role to me? Is it to really use some of our Renew tools to track and assess the process? How students are working, how facilitators are working through the process with students, where they are in the process, and to track outcomes. Maybe you're also facilitating meetings, team meetings, and problem solving with people within the school at your sites. Maybe understanding your agencies or schools' protocols and policies that could affect the implementation of Renew. And also at the same time, your role as a coach is really developing rapport and collaboration, not only with the building coach and Renew and the facilitators, but the administrators and people on the PBIS teams or the Renew implementation team. Your role as a coach is to help provide community resources to Renew facilitators, help them problem solve, and help them stay focused on the use goal and the team planning process to meet those goals. You may be providing boosters and trainings to Renew facilitators based on the data that you're seeing and their needs. It might be observing them in action to help improve their skills and give them direct feedback. There are many aspects to your job as a Renew TOT. I think it's important for you guys to reflect on what are the ways you really know that Renew is being implemented with fidelity, and what are the structures within each site to really support Renew. In this slide, I really want you to think about implementation structures that really support good implementation of any practice. In this case, we're really specifically talking about Renew. But these are really things that we should put in place before we begin any kind of initiative or practice, and to make sure there's good, strong feedback loops up the cascade, as well as support loops that follow down that can implement and affect the Renew facilitators and building coach in youth and families. So thinking about Renew, we really want to make sure that facilitators, when there's a need, or they want to share their successes, or they have need to have some support around problem solving, around barriers to implementation, that there's a structure in place of people that they can go to, a team within their site that they can go to seek assistance and help around particular issues, or just to share the successes. In the schools and agencies that we support, we really either think about having the building have a Renew implementation team if there's no other team that exists, or if they have a PBIS tier team, that could be a natural place for the facilitators to go to gain support, system-wide support, and also for that tiered team to really be monitoring the data and the outcomes and knowing how to support Renew, as well as build capacity for Renew within their site. The Renew TOT are the people, yourselves, that would get that other feedback. The Renew implementation team or a PBIS tier team would be communicating with you about what are some of the barriers to implementation, what are some of the challenges, or again, what are some of the success stories. And then in turn, you're bringing that up to the state team to celebrate those successes or to problem solve around barriers. The other thing we have in addition that's not on this slide is our team in New Hampshire. We've created a national community of practice for our state teams to join on quarterly. So sometimes we're talking about new topics. We're having other states present on new things and new tools that they're doing with Renew, or sometimes we're just simply problem solving. And so that information can actually go back to you as Renew Train the Trainers, back to the school sites teams, and then eventually back to the Renew facilitators and coach. If we don't have this structure in place, what we find is many times, and often or not, Renew facilitators get trained, get jazzed up about the practice, but they don't have the system back in their sites to support them. So maybe they won't implement the practice. They just were dying to try to get going with a student. They get overwhelmed. They might not have the materials. They might not have the space. They might not feel like they have the time to do it. So all that good training that they just went to kind of goes to waste. Or they might start it, but be unfamiliar with different phases of Renew. So it's really never takes off, and they won't get good outcomes for students and families. So really making sure as a train the trainer that you really think about what are the implementation structures that are in place in each school and each site that you support. So in thinking about that, what are some of the common factors that allow for good implementation of Renew with youth? Have you heard and considered if LEAs are celebrating these? And who do the LEAs share the results with? And how is it communicated? In one of my sites at Kingswood, I can give you, that's a regional high school in New Hampshire, and it's really around our lake region. It's very rural, and there's parts of that community that have really high poverty rates and lack of access to transportation. It was a school that was really struggling on how to get kids to attend their school and keep them engaged in their learning, and therefore they adopted Renew. Part of their plan and their LEAs was to really go get jazzed up and excited to support facilitators, but they really make an effort to really talk about Renew as a school-wide community. So when they implement Renew, Renew is actually always on their agenda, probably 4 times a year as a faculty now, to at least share data, celebrate new facilitators being trained, and also celebrate successes with that students are having. In addition to that, their LEA now goes to the school board and regularly and updates their school board about Renew and the outcomes it's having to again bring in the resources the school might need to continue to implement the practice. This particular school also reached out to the governor and asked the governor if he would come visit the school to learn more about public education. He came to the school, and they actually made sure that a student that had gotten the Renew service gave him a tour of the building and could talk to him about Renew. Now, that's an exemplar for sure, but that's what we really hope, that the word is spreading within your school about what Renew is, how to get trained, and the impact that it can have for students. And I'm hoping that these are some things we can go back to discuss when we have that reflection time. Okay. The writ. What is the purpose of the writ? This is where we should have a game. It's really to assess the implementation of the practice, assess the quality in which Renew is being delivered, maintain the facilitator skills, and decide the kind of professional development each facilitator is needing to improve their practice. I think that if you go on, Silky, some bullets probably will appear. The Renew the Renew Integrity Tool really should be a professional development plan that you and the facilitator co-construct based on their strengths and based on their needs, in an ongoing plan that you revisit. Sometimes through the RIT, you will also see some common themes with each facilitator, which tells you as a train the trainer that maybe this cohort, these facilitators at this school need kind of booster around a certain aspect of Renew, whether it's forming teams, whether it's engaging families, or maybe it's on community resources and sharing to bring to the table. Thank you, Dee. So why did we revise the writ? I know we get a lot of pushback like, oh, the Renew leaders in New Hampshire are creating new tools. Part of it is really based on a lot of feedback we get from our national partners. We felt like in the former writ, the original writ, there are a lot of questions our national partners and researchers had about some of the benchmarks, that they weren't specific enough, that the language wasn't clear enough, and leading to inconsistency on what does implementation really mean or look like. So we really dug deep as a team, and created this revised tool with our national partners from Illinois and Maryland to really think about greater clarity on each item. Sometimes we're seeing facilitators rating higher than actually being observed doing the practice. So it really gave us good information. There are a lot of similarities. You can advance, that's great, Silky. There are a lot of the similarities of the writ. The big differences and the things that we'll talk about today really are that we, I think, got clearer instructions and set the expectations that maybe are tighter timeframes. And I think the benchmarks themselves have been, are more clear and specific. And there's really not that many add-ons, but the language is clearer in each and less gray areas. We still want facilitators to score an 80%. We still have 5 domains of the practice. We want you to repeat this instrument with every 3 to 4 months until they start reaching. And we really strongly encourage somehow you observe a mapping meeting in one team meeting. That part hasn't changed. It's always been an expectation, although I know it's a hard one to achieve based on the structure and the support you have as train the trainers. In the first section, this is really the instructional page, the first page. We're going to just really talk about the gold standard here. But we want you to do multiple writs for multiple youth, meaning that if a facilitator is working with 3 youth, they should have 3 different writs that you're conducting with them. And the reason why we decided to do that is because Renew is so individualized, the experience is going to look different for each youth. So it may not be going well for a facilitator with their first youth. Maybe the young person isn't coming in frequently enough to school for them to really implement well, or for them to really feel their skills are being used. And we want to not have that be a total score for all their practice that they do with every student. And so we're really breaking it down now for them to look at doing this RIT per youth. And we need to do it more than once. The first RIT now, the difference between this and the former RIT is we're asking people to do it as soon as 3 to 4 months in the process, hoping that they will be encouraged to have gone through a team meeting and have completed the mapping. By waiting 4 to 6 months, we found that it was much too long to wait, that people who were really stuck in getting started, we couldn't correct and give them feedback on how to make appropriate changes to improve implementation. So we need to get in there earlier to really give them the feedback and the support so they can move through each phase. And we continue to do the RIT at a 4 to 6 months interval after that. To make sure that they're continuing to move through the process, and we can keep track and give them feedback on how they're doing in each domain.
Kathy, two questions. One, this is version 7, 2019. So this is the one that I have and I've posted says version 6.
Oh, okay.
Just
Well,
FYI, the screenshot.
We will make sure you get this version.
Well, if you note at the bottom of your screen, it says Renew Integrity Tool version 6.
Yeah.
So we can work that out after the call just to make sure. I mean, that's the one that I have.
Okay. Okay.
And that's the one I pulled off of your website probably more than a month ago. So if this is an updated one, I don't know what the difference would be. But secondly, just for the Renew TOTs on the call, I don't want you to fall out of your chair. Kathy and I have talked about the expectation of doing a RIT with each facilitator and each youth connection. I want you to stick with let's get started and get better. So I know absolutely for sure that the capacity to conduct a RIT for each facilitator and each youth is a significant expectation.
Right.
We are surely going to talk about that as we move forward. So just so you know, like this is the gold standard. This is kind of the aim. But Kathy and I have talked at length about how your roles and responsibilities in your intermediate units certainly exceed Renew. So just duly noted, this is where we are in this conversation about healthy, frequent coaching that supports fidelity in practice.
Right. I think the big thing is making sure that for me, the goals, it is hard to do multiple use on, for sure, RITs on multiple youth. But I need to put the expectation out there as a gold standard. I would hope that you're feeling comfortable enough to at least meet with each facilitator to get an idea that they really are implementing well with a youth. And I have seen from my own experience that waiting 6 months to do the RIT is too long. Part of that I've seen from my experience that when I go in 6 months to do the RIT and they're not even done the mapping yet, then I feel like we've lost the students. If there's too much lag time for facilitators getting through the mapping, most students are feeling like, what is this all about? I'm not sure where it's taking me, and they begin to get disengaged. So I feel like for me going in at a 3 to 4 month time period, develops stronger rapport with the facilitator, but I can really advise them quicker in the process how to get back on track if they lost some of that momentum at the beginning. And sometimes it's beyond our control as far as students moving through the process. Part of that is because of, at least out in New Hampshire, lots of snow days really affect the quality of time that can be set aside to meet with students to get through the mapping phase. But we've also seen many students drop out of Renew simply because it's taking too long to get to my goals. So my thought is if you can get in there sooner, that's more important than anything else, I think. And just make sure you really explain the purpose of the writ. To me, that's the other thing that's really important on this. I really try to go in and explain that this is a instrument that we use together to really talk about where your strengths and celebrate those as strengths, but also kind of think and reflect on where you want more support, what you think is going well. If you're having trouble implementing things, is our time to problem solve together. So really explaining to them what the intent of the writ is really important from the beginning. And just making sure you have dates on here. That hasn't changed. Having dates of when they were trained, having dates of when they started enrolled with a student, and having the dates of when they began mapping. Those are the big things to pay attention to. And for our startup, what we're really looking at are people actually meeting and getting through the process. We're trying to be more clear that the mapping sessions should occur weekly. Part of that was unclear before, and so people were just meeting when they could meet. Sometimes they would check in with the students but not do a map. Then that would be extending that beyond the 30 days. Mapping really can be done in the 30 days. And remember, the instructions read 30 school days. So vacations, you would count those out. Those don't work against a facilitator. If there was a holiday, if the school was closed because of snow, those are the things that we kind of sit through and kind of look at the calendar to make sure those aren't counted against a facilitator. So really going through the mapping sessions weekly will help facilitators reach the fidelity of 30 days in the mapping session. The other thing we're looking at, we've got some interesting feedback from our national partners that was kind of new to us, that in some of their schools there's been a lot of turnover the last couple of years. So facilitators that began working with the youth, they just trained, all of a sudden now is left and in a different position or usually in a different school. So they're no longer able to facilitate. And again, we want to make sure the student gets good renew. So we really want to make sure that's an item we pay attention to and really talk to our facilitators if that transition is happened. How can we guarantee that the student gets a new facilitator quickly? And what information is going to be shared with that facilitator by the youth? So making sure that the new facilitator is seeing the maps, hearing about the strengths of the student, and having the student maybe share that. If the old facilitator happens to still be in the school, it's great to have a joint meeting of all three. So those are some new things to kind of think about. Other things, and when we think about our mapping session, again, mainly this is around language that we wanted to clarify, is really showing that the maps have a balance of graphics and words and that are clearly labeled and well organized, and that the facilitator really took time to fully explore each map. Now that number 3, the facilitator took time to with the youth to fully explore each map. That one may be hard to show evidence of unless you're actually seeing the map and can tell that it's from the youth voice or you're observing a meeting. And I know it may be hard to actually think, oh, how am I with all my other duties being able to go to a school to observe a meeting? There are times I have used Zoom to have them, because I have not been able to get to that school or observe that mapping meeting or a team meeting, but I've used technology to kind of sit back and do that, calling in, Skyping in. Sometimes I've had facilitators actually videotape a session, and they're so brave and send that to me, and I can give them feedback that way as well. It's really kind of thinking about, can you really get a sense that the mapping part is going well, it being implemented as intended, that they're using not just words, but they're using pictures as well in their maps, and that most importantly, the youth voice is being represented. When you're coaching and training facilitators, one of the other things that we're really pushing in the mapping, and then I'm going to move to teams, but I want to really mention this because it's something we forget, is sometimes when facilitators get stuck in the process and they don't know where to go next, one of the items I always been training on lately is having them go back and remap a particular map. So it might be that the facilitator has moved through all the maps, done a great job, but they have hit a roadblock down the road, and something's changed in the lives of their young person they're helping. So now that's something that we're also training on, is to go back to person-centered planning and use graphic facilitation to kind of capture those changes. Team meetings, we know in the field, looking at the national data and our own state data, that team meetings are probably the hardest thing to reach. People have a lot of fears around team meetings. There's a lot of pushback. But we have to remember that the mapping session is just the what of the work. That's just telling a piece of the story of what the goals are and what the work will be. Team meetings are where the work will happen. And skills with our facilitators to get to the team meetings. So this section really is about making sure people are going through this process. Pay attention clearly to the benchmark. Team meetings should happen anywhere between 2 to 3 weeks after the first map, and no longer than that. So really helping them, what are the barriers to getting started, problem solving that with them around that, giving them some tips and techniques. And the other two things that we're seeing in the field is people were coming to the team meetings reluctant and unprepared. So really making sure that when not just facilitators are preparing the youth, but facilitators are taking the time to prepare the team members, why they are coming, what Renew is all about, and if they need to bring any data to the meetings, what data would be helpful. And that the team meetings are ongoing. They're not one and done. And that's been a mistake, I think, that we're seeing in the field, that, okay, we had a team meeting, great, now we can just check in with the young person. So making that sure that your facilitator convenes the teams as needed, based on on goals being accomplished. If the youth is accomplishing goals on their own and there's evidence of that, then great. Team meetings don't need to happen that frequently. But as they're struggling to really work on a goal, you may want to make sure that you have tighter team meetings that happen more frequently.
Kathy, can you say one more time? I think I heard you say the youth team meeting starts how close to
yeah, pretty close, 2 to 3 weeks.
after which map?
The very last map.
Okay,
So,
I thought you said the first. I thought I heard you say the first map. Just for clarity.
It's probably my New England accent getting in the way.
Last map, 2 to 3 weeks.
Map.
Youth team meeting should be
That's
happening.
right. That's
Thank
right.
you.
Yeah. One of the tips that I do as a Renew coach, and some of you may also use this tip, but I really rely on what I call backward planning. And I have my facilitators open up their calendar as they're getting close to being done maps. And I really talk to them about, let's talk about when that first team meeting happens. Say you're done mapping on, April 4th. And we know that in New Hampshire, we have April vacation coming up in 2 weeks. When ideally would it make sense to do that team meeting? And what do you need to do in order to get prepared for it? So we'll kind of have a tentative meeting scheduled on their calendar, either right before April vacation or right after. And then I can say, okay, put that on your calendar. Now let's talk about the different steps that need to happen before we have that team meeting. And by doing that has really helped them. Building social capital, nothing has changed here. But please remember read it carefully, because under each section, each benchmark, there's something that says skip if not a priority. Hopefully all of it's a priority, but for some youth, it might not be a goal of theirs. It might not be a goal, for instance, to do extracurricular activities or get involved in the community at this point where they are in the process. If that is the case, skip it. You do not need to score it, but do adjust it from the total score so that the facilitators do not get, marked against for not having done that. It's just not a priority for the student at that point. You should be seeing things, though. I would hope that, academic concerns are being addressed in some way. Behavior concerns are probably being addressed because those are things usually that bring them to Renew. Hopefully, the facilitators have evidence of some kind of career employment activities that are happening, whether it's they're helping them find a team that's going to help them research a job or work on resume or job applications. You really want to talk to your facilitators when they're, and explain that part when they're doing the RIT. What are you doing for activities in each of these benchmarks? Okay, I think we can, for exit. Oh, this is always the hardest. Most people aren't ready to talk about transitioning from Renew during the initial training, but it can happen at any time with some of the youth that we work with. They're real transient population. Or sometimes they're feeling, I'm done with Renew. I feel like I don't need the support anymore. So you really want to encourage your facilitators to be mindful of transition, be mindful of readiness. So one question to really think about in this section is there evidence that the youth no longer needs individualized intensive supports? If that is the case, what evidence are you collecting that shows that? Are they reaching, most of their goals that they identified? Their grades, are they passing their grades? Are they coming to school more often? Do they feel like they have enough natural supports? Those are the kind of questions and evidence to me that would show readiness. And if they're showing readiness, then I'm really going to be purposeful and help them reach that benchmark, the second benchmark of forming a really good transition team, exit team. And what I mean by this, I have a student that is ready in a school. He's met all his goals. He's now taking college prep classes. His behavior is no longer getting in the way. And he has a really good national supports back in place in his life. So when we talk about him being ready for Renew, the facilitator and the youth met several times to talk about that. And now they're having a formal meeting in mid-April with his caregivers, with some of his teachers, with his school counselor, and a mentor from the community to really pull together some of the final remaining goals that he wants in place. But other people on that team will be identified to carry them out. So that's just an example of what an ideal exit from Renew would look like, but really talking to facilitators about that throughout the process, because sometimes it comes sooner than what we're ready for. And we can move on to the next slide. And don't forget this section. And again, I'm not sure your process in Pennsylvania. When I have this process, I usually am sitting down next to the facilitator or through a Zoom conversation, and we pull this up. And look, and I co-construct this with them. I will tell them, looking at your maps, this is what I'm seeing. How are you feeling about just at the initial startup of the process? What do you see as your strengths? What are the areas you would like more support in? And that becomes part of the professional development action plan. I go through each of these domains with them and really highlight their strengths, but also really talk about those next steps so we can go back and have an action plan. If I'm seeing, if I'm seeing a common need with many facilitators, I would bring it back to that PBIS team or the Renew implementation team, kind of let them know that maybe we need a booster or more training around that. To me, this is the most important out of all, is the co-constructed development plan for the facilitator. And there we go.
So, Kathy, in a second here, we're going to have the reflection on what we just went over, and I'm hoping to get some initial feedback about this, the updates to the tool. We know that when we look at how this data is put into the Renew data system, we're able to look at that data across all the writs that are submitted so that we get a better idea of where there's maybe a bit more of a training need. And so it helps drive some of the work that we do in webinars. And okay, so the question you might have is, how are we going to transition, or what does that timeline look like from when we move from the 2012, the one that we're using currently, to the one that we just reviewed today? Right now, as of March 29th, we're prepping the P-track system. And today we're sharing just an initial look at this tool to share like what are the differences. We've talked about that briefly before. Today was a little bit more of a deeper dive. And in August will be a hard, August 1, we will switch. So you want to keep that in mind, that as you're working with facilitators and you're scheduling time with them, that we will, August 1, the system as of right now will be showing the new RIT, which will feature 5 domain scores. You don't have to go in and put in every item for that tool in the system. You just need to show what the final score is. One of the questions we get repeatedly is, if that item does not currently apply to that facilitator, what do we do? And what we would say is just adjust the end score. So you might score at a 0. So you could we've talked about this one of 2 ways. And after talking to Kathy, you would just adjust that score. The other option was to give it a 0 and let the true score speak for itself. But sometimes that bothers people if they get a low score on the RIT and they look and they're like, but I haven't done that yet with a student. That's, kind of where your coaching is falling. It just happens to be with that facilitator. So we'll be talking about that. If you have any questions about how to score an item, or how to think about that final score for each domain or each section, don't hesitate to reach out and ask.
I will say the other thing is, once you've scored the mapping domain, the startup domain, if you're going back to, say, 3 months after that first initial thing and they haven't really got to domain 5 or domain 4 yet, you don't have to go back and rescore the mapping, because that's probably hasn't changed. The maps are done in that first phase of renew. There may be shifts in the team meeting phase because they've improved their practice, but the mapping probably hasn't changed because the maps are complete. So just know that you don't have to complete the whole tool all over again, or just use the initial score that you created the first time and the mapping in the startup.
Oh, good to know.
Yeah. And this is just, again, a slide to show you how I've used data with my Renew implementation teams, and even used this data to kind of talk with administrators about, what's happening in their school with Renew. This doesn't point out individual Renew facilitators, but what it does point out is the averages of all the facilitators at that site. Their strengths, obviously, they're reaching the gold standard around the mapping, which is great, and strong engagement with their youth. But you can see here from this slide that the startup process was really hard for this school. Many feeling they didn't have a voice of, once they got trained, how am I going to select? Is there a process to select the student, which they fell behind on? Then it was, I don't have the space or time to really meet with students. And because it was such a common theme among all the facilitators, it led me to collect the data and sit down with the Renew implementation team, but the administrators as well, so we could do some real problem solving. Part of my job as that liaison is really to say, you've invested so much time and energy and money to get people trained in your school. However, we know that that the time is a big factor. So let's problem solve different kind of things. And by having that conversation in my sites, it has opened up some really creative solutions. For this particular school, it led that the staff who are Renew facilitators no longer have to have a school duty, such as cafeteria or bus or hallway, that Renew becomes their duty. So that really made them feel valued and felt like, okay, I can carve out that time now because I don't have a duty. In another school, they looked at the same kind of data, and realized that they had in their schedule what they called an intervention block every single day for academics. And they felt Renew was an important intervention as well for behavior. So if they were a Renew facilitator, they were given and blocked off in their schedule protected time to deliver Renew one day a week during that intervention block. So creative things can happen, but the data is the thing that tells the story and kind of pushes the solution forward. And I think we talked about this. This was one of the forms at the very end is how do you collect those observations of how is it being done? How do you collect them? How do you know what it looks like in practice? I can look at their maps, but seeing them in action gives me a little bit more insight. An example would be sometimes I might not capture that is the youth really leading their meeting or are they just sitting participating? By observing a team meeting, I really get the sense that the student is leading their team meeting. I might be looking at, is this facilitator really using good active listening skills in reframing and redirecting, or are they simply telling the student what to do and asking a lot of questions? Are they using silence appropriately to kind of let the student really reflect before jumping in and answering for the youth or asking a lot of questions? So think about that. I know this might be the hardest thing to do in the job you do is how do you get actually in there to observe them in action? And sometimes facilitators get nervous, let's be honest, about, oh, I'm being watched. I just try to make them know that when I do this, I'm going to partner with them. It's really for me to give them feedback. And if they want me to show them something while I'm in the process with them, I'll be glad to help them with whatever that is they might be struggling with. So just be talking among your team, I think, about how you would use this section and is it meaningful for you? And now we're at final reflections.
You have an option right now. You can use this QR code or the URL at the bottom to share some thoughts or ideas that you're having, or you can simply unmute yourself. There's 15 of us on this call, so we're happy just to have an open discussion as well. And of course, there's the chat box. So these are a few questions to think about the work we've done today, Kathy.
Some of the questions, but are some indicators you've seen a strong implementation. Some of the professional activities that facilitators could benefit from. What are some of the implementation challenges? And an important one is how do you acknowledge facilitators and their implementation success? I have some ideas and thoughts that I can share with you, but I really want to hear from you. If these questions are not something you're reflecting on and thinking about, it was something else from the presentation, feel free certainly to get that thought out there so we can be supportive and kind of problem solve around that. And if you're not sure and thinking, one of the things that I love is my last question, which is how do you acknowledge facilitators and their implementation success? Why would that be important?
Okay, I've unmuted everybody. Okay.
Yes, this is much more. Have you taken? No, I never saw it. Amazing.
Okay, everybody's unmuted, so we're thinking about. Yeah, I should not do that. All right, I've muted everybody. Okay.
Raise the hand feature.
Yeah, I'm bringing up the Padlet to see if people have put anything up there, so stand by. Okay, I like this last question. How do you acknowledge facilitators and their implementation success? So if anyone wants to share ideas, or even like, why would we ask that question? It might be something that's foreign to you or myself at the moment. Like, have you had an opportunity to do that? And the way Kathy asked is like, why would that be a good idea? Like, how are you encouraging Renew facilitators or acknowledging them for the work that they're doing? Feel free to unmute yourself or use the chat box.
Hi, Silky.
Yes.
This is Lori Hersig from LIU 12.
Hi, Lori.
We have some facilitators from Chambersburg School District who are going to present at a assistant principals network. They've done such an amazing job with implementing their Renew team and expanding it from high school to middle school. And so we want them to share that with other districts to try to get other districts on board with Renew, but also just to show what a success they've had with improving attendance and grades and credits and things like that.
That's fantastic. Yeah.
That's so exciting to hear. And there is nothing that is better than having them showcase their own work. I've seen facilitators just become so proud when I say, could you be this exemplar? Could you speak to this, at this conference or to your school board members or the administrators? So what a great way to highlight their work and acknowledge all of the success they're having. That's excellent. There was one time, I'll share a story with number 4. That one time I was bringing in little acknowledgments myself for facilitators. Maybe it was because it was probably around Valentine's Day, and I knew that February was a hard month. And so I think I probably gave them all a little Valentine and a little candy. And then in springtime, I did something else. And then one of the facilitators pointed out to me, Kathy Franker, our Renew coach and trainer, always acknowledges us. She's always bringing us little thank yous, and they're simple things and nothing that, homemade cards that I make them if I have time. But we would really like our own building principal to acknowledge us because, this intervention is really, really important for kids. And we hear it from you all the time, but it would be nice for our building principal just to, recognize it. So I did go to the principal and just say, hey, this is just to make you aware. This is some feedback. And since that time, he just didn't even realize, but he made sure, just simple things like I'd like these people who are Renew facilitators to stand up and want to thank you for the work that you're doing. And if you've ever been on a teacher or staff person here on a Renew team meeting, please stand up. You're going above and beyond helping kids. And it was just kind of a nice way internally for people to get recognized that hadn't been before. And it
Kathy,
really...
we have feedback on the Padlet.
Awesome.
So thank you to those who are posting. It took me a second to get to the site. One comment is, I think, regarding question number 1, administrative support through attendance at team meetings is a strong indicator of good implementation.
Absolutely, yeah.
Somebody else shared, I like the idea of using Zoom meetings to help with support and coaching. So Kathy, that was something that you mentioned earlier that I also, liked hearing, and I think that shares another way for people. We sometimes talk about as coaches, is it okay if we Zoom or we conference call if we can't get there? And so we say, yes, that's a viable way to support and coach.
Yeah.
And then another comment, I agree, admin attendance is important, as well as a team that works together, is working together and is on the same page.
Mm-hmm. And I guess that's probably referring to that structure in the beginning slide when we really talked about having a system structure to this to support facilitators, whether it be a Renew implementation team, which you hope an administrator is part of, or that PBIS team. Again, when we think about it and drill down at the student level, those individual student teams are where the work happens, right? This is what the work is, but it's those individual student teams that are going to help accomplish those goals. Same thing at a system level. We are describing with our facilitators, they're describing what the work is that system team that's going to say this is how we're going to get it done.
And that is Chambersburg School District for sure. Lori, I want to appreciate you saying something and sharing the work that they're doing. Is that administration at the district level is so on board and was actually in the Renew training and has worked really hard to get Renew started and getting better, expanding to the middle school population. So really an indication of how strong, how critical that administrative support and endorsement and having somebody there to relieve any barriers.
Yep.
We have a few minutes left. Any other comments for Kathy or questions that you'd like us to consider? All right, we have one more slide to share with you. I'm going to let Kathy speak to this final slide, and then I will close us out for the afternoon.
Great. On our website, we do have a process in place for facilitators and coaches to, if they want to become certified in Renew. For Renew facilitators, it's definitely optional. But there is a spelled out process. The fee is minimal. It really is. I think it's like $30 for 18 months. The main reason we established it, particularly at the facilitators level, it actually came from facilitators in our field, mainly at our mental health centers. So we have many schools implementing Renew, and all our community behavioral health agencies in our state currently are implementing Renew. And we heard from them that they really wanted to become certified, that it was part of their professional development plan. So a lot of feedback, again, from the people that are utilizing Renew made us prompt, like, what can we give back to our facilitators? What can we give back to our coaches? You don't have to be certified to be a Renew facilitator, but if people are looking for that, there is a process and a way for us to help support that. So please check out our website. You can email me directly, and I can help you with that process if you would like. Again, we're seeing this trend in New Hampshire that many people right now are moving to different schools that are paying a higher salary, and schools are jazzed up to have people be certified Renew facilitators in their school. So just information to share. And I want to thank everyone for being on the call today, and I hope this met your needs.
Okay, so we're closing out. I closed out, but I was muted. So here's your dates. Everyone have an awesome afternoon. Kathy, hang on the line, and you and I will
Okay,
know that. We'll see
good.
everybody at the forum. Know that Kathy is the closing keynote at the Implementers Forum in May, so you will get to see her there. And she's also going to be supporting our Close Renew session on May 15th at the forum. Everybody have an awesome afternoon. Stand by, Kathy.
Thank you. I will.
Karen Deer, there goes Karen. I just missed her.